Welcome to the Reporter Podcast with Beau Berman.
Hey everybody, this is Reporter, the podcast that delves into the minds and lives of broadcast news reporters and anchors, delivering a behind-the-scenes look at their careers, methods, best practices, and some personal stories from the trenches of journalism. Today we have a guest who has popped out of the TV news business pretty recently, Marisa Mendelson. Before that, she was reporting in Tucson, Arizona, and now is pursuing an acting career in California. Marisa, how are you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Reporter. And have you had a chance to listen to any of the other episodes?
I have actually. I've listened to several, so it's an honor that you asked me to do this. Thank you.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Cool. Well, I'm glad you've, had a chance to listen a little bit, and hopefully it's something you've enjoyed to some extent. Every episode is a little different. Some of them are probably a little bit redundant, but I'm excited for this one because a lot of the people I've talked to so far are people who I've directly worked with or know pretty well. And I think I've only met you once or twice at IRE conventions or whatever they're called, conferences rather. So it's cool to hear some of your stories. So
actually, I think the first time we met was at an awards ceremony.
Oh, okay.
I think that's correct. I think it was at an AP awards ceremony, maybe.
Perhaps, yeah.
I could be wrong.
Yeah, but it's a small world. So there's obviously a ton of connections with everybody in this business. But so let's talk about how, first of all, for people who don't know you, you're in California now, right?
Correct. I'm in the Los Angeles area.
Okay. And where did you grow up? Like, where did you go to high school? What part of the country?
Okay. I went to New World School of the Arts. It was a small performing arts high school in Miami. It was actually in downtown Miami, Florida. It was an audition-only school, magnet school.
Okay.
And I grew up there.
Very nice. And where did you go to undergraduate somewhere?
I went to UCF for my bachelor's degree in broadcast journalism.
Excellent. That's the Golden Knights, is that right?
Yes, and I never went to a single sporting event while I was there, but when I was a reporter for WFTV in Orlando, that's when I went to my first football game at UCF.
Nice.
To cover it.
Yeah. All right. So you grew up in Miami. So where was your first on-air station? Was it in Orlando, or where was that?
I interned in Orlando when I was in college, but my first on-air station was in Rock Island, Illinois, in the Quad Cities. Ooh. So it was Market 92 at the time.
Okay. And I think you told me that was it just one day after graduating college?
Well, I was hired before I graduated, and I was hired actually at an RTNDA conference. Now it's, I think, called RTDNA.
Right.
Yeah, so I was hired at one of those conferences, which kind of makes the point that it's so important to go to those conferences because you really do get to meet news directors and people who are important at stations. So the day I graduated, I left to make that road trip on to Illinois and start my first job.
And what was it like? So you drove from Florida to Illinois?
Correct. I did.
Was it by yourself?
No, actually my mom did the drive with me. And by the time we got to Illinois, I ended up having pneumonia.
Oh my goodness.
Because think about it, I had my finals that last week and, had to deal with the packing and all the stress and the temperature changes. And by the time we got to Illinois, I noticed I felt sick. And I had a horrible, horrible fever. And so my mom took me straight to the hospital in the Quad Cities, and they diagnosed me with pneumonia. I mean, luckily it was a really, really mild case. So I ended up having to start the job about a week late, but wow. The station was so nice about it and, sent me a little fruit basket. And, I was so scared that they were going to be mad at me for being sick and having to start late, but they were just so kind. And, but yeah, stress can definitely take a toll on someone's immune system, I guess.
Yeah, that's wild. Oh yeah, absolutely it can. I think. Wow. So off to not the greatest start, but sounds like pretty understanding of the situation.
I've never been sick like that in my life, and never was sick like that again. But yeah,
Wow.
you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So Rock Island, how far is that from like Chicago?
It's about a 2-hour drive.
Did you find yourself driving to Chicago at all when you worked in that market to kind of get away from?
I did it once. I ended up making friends with another reporter, and the news director knew we were such good friends. He would always give us the same schedule. So one time she and I made the trip one weekend and drove there. And it's funny, when you start off in one of those small towns, it's not, a real city. So the tallest buildings are maybe 4 floors. And I remember we drove to Chicago and we were like, oh my God, it's a real city, because there's big buildings, and it had been so long since we had seen a real city. And I say that in quotes.
Right.
But it was pretty cool.
So what were you hired as in Illinois? What was your role?
Back then we called them one-man bands. And then over time that became politically incorrect. So now they're called MMJs. So what that is, for people who don't know, it's someone who reports, edits, and shoots.
Got it. All their own stuff. So, and when you got to that market, did you feel prepared for that, like based on your college training?
Oh, yes. My college training was absolutely excellent. And also, with my internships, I did 2 different internships, and I was so hands-on. I would actually volunteer to go in during times that I wasn't scheduled to go in, so that I could help produce. And, I was a really good editor and shooter at that point. And I had used all the same equipment. And at that time we were still shooting on tape as well. But yes, I was definitely prepared.
Speaking of tape, I can tell you, I love so much shooting video on cards now, the SD cards. It's just like the greatest joy compared to tapes. The tape situation was just, I remember my first market in Odessa, Texas, I had tapes that got eaten, so to speak, by the machine, had your footage on it and like the little tapes hanging out of the thing, the film, and you're just like, oh my goodness.
And the cameras were so much bigger. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So some folks the younger folks will never understand the tumultuous situation of dealing with tape, I think. But all right, so back to your situation. So you're in Rock Island, and how long were you there for?
So I was there for 6 months because the company wanted to promote me to their flagship station, which was in Des Moines, Iowa. Now, that was, I think at the time, it was in the 50s or 60s market-wise. I guess, I did such a good job there, quote unquote, that, they wanted me to be in their bigger market, which I ended up kicking ass at that station too. Not to toot my own horn, but, I was always the top story. I was heavily promoted. I, always beat the other stations to the interviews. I just, and I was just a regular breaking news reporter, court crime beat kind of thing.
Yeah. Nice. But, so that was a short stay in your first market, and then you had to move again, albeit not as far as of a move. So you moved to Iowa, and you're doing well there. And what happened next? How long were you there for?
Oh gosh, only a year. And then I went on to what would be my favorite market of all of them. And that was Fort Myers, Florida. And I was there for almost 5 years as their consumer investigative reporter / troubleshooter reporter.
I wonder if you were there the same time as my cousin and his wife.
I was.
Okay. Dan Haggerty and Kristen.
Uh-huh.
Nice. Man, so many people have worked in Fort Myers. Was Noah there at the same time as well?
He was.
Wow.
He was. We hung out with the same group of people. Yep.
It's like a special club down there.
Oh yeah, we used to do karaoke every Wednesday night at this place called Mona Lisa's. all the stations. I mean, it was crazy. I don't know of any other market where all the stations would hang out together and be so close. But that market, it was really special.
I definitely get that vibe. I mean, a lot of really, really talented and really good reporters and anchors came out of that market from what I've seen. Just a ton of them.
Yeah,
it's almost like there was something in the water. I've talked to Kristen
Jamie Yukas. Jamie Yukas is now on network. She came out of there. Just so many talented people. I mean, you can't even begin.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's cool that you were there. So that was kind of your favorite stop. And then so you did consumer investigative, and that's kind of like a medium market. What is it, like in the 60s or something, 60 range?
Yes. Yeah. At the time it was.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was even in the 70s. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. It's always tough to keep track because they do change too. It's like
right. Every year
thing. Yeah. It always changes. So sometimes people will be like, oh yeah, that's market, 151. And then I'm like, no, it's 147, but there's really no real answer. It just depends on the moment in time, or the year, I guess. But, all right. So you're in Fort Myers for almost 5 years, having a lot of fun down there, a lot of young people in that market. And in terms of your coworkers and, hanging out with all three stations, and what happened next career wise?
Yeah, so I re-signed my contract at that station 3 different times. After the news director who hired me left there, we had multiple news directors go through there. And eventually it was just time to move on. And I went to, and at this point, I think, more concerned about getting a salary increase, unfortunately. And also I just was so, into like the news director who hired me. If he was still there, I would have stayed for sure. It doesn't matter how much they paid me. But, I just was, I think, ready to move on. So I go to Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, to the Fox affiliate, and I'm hired as an investigative reporter. And that I was so afraid to go to because, you think of Oklahoma City, or, are people going to be like, what are they going to be like over there? But it ended up just being such a cool place. And I don't know why I'm pausing here. I don't even know what else I'm going to say, but, I did some great work there, made some amazing friends, and stayed there for, I don't know, around 3 years. I don't really remember.
Okay. And that was kind of seems like your first like full-fledged, full-time, 100% investigative, not even with like the consumer tint. Did you like it, love it, hate it? The investigative aspect of it.
I went through 2 different news directors there. The first one ended up getting fired. And I butted heads with him, I think, a little bit. It was kind of, I think, a love-hate relationship with him sometimes. But other than that, and also there was one other investigative reporter there. There were 2 of us. And, I think I wasn't really on the best terms with him either for some reason. But other than that, I really loved it there. I did some stories that went national and actually changed laws in the state and, really made a difference. And, that's in the end what really matters.
Right.
So, the fact that you made a difference. And, that's why we do this. And on a personal note, I just made some friends that are lifelong friends and just had some really cool experiences socially. Like met some Thunder players, met the Flaming Lips and, still talk to some of them to this day. And so it was a really cool experience. And if you don't know who the Flaming Lips are, that's a band that's based out of there.
Yeah, I did know that, but I didn't know they were based out of there. Yeah, that's a cool experience. So, all right, so you're there about 2 or 3, 3.5 years, whatever. And what came after that?
So then I went to my biggest market, but it wasn't an investigative job. It was just straight reporting, and that was in Orlando at WFTV.
Okay.
And I was so excited to go back to Orlando because when I went to college there, I just loved that city and always said to myself, oh, I always want to be a reporter here. And but that particular station was just unlike any other station. And I only ended up staying there for 1 year.
So it was not a great experience there.
Right. Basically, they did not end up renewing my contract.
And so what made you, I mean, a lot of people, once they become an investigative reporter, like full-fledged, full-time, they stay in that role. But, you obviously took a general assignment position, it sounds like, in Orlando after being investigative at Fox in Oklahoma City. So what made you willing to make that switch? Was it just the fact that it kind of got you closer to home and to where you went to college?
So there were a couple things going on. So at the time I did that, my two grandparents were both very, very ill. And I wanted to be closer to them. And so that was the main goal. And also I had just gotten an agent for the first time. He actually approached me. He was in Oklahoma City overnight and was watching the news and saw one of my reports, and he contacted me and said he wanted to represent me. And, I had always avoided having an agent because I felt like I didn't need one. And also, I wasn't really looking. But when he contacted me, I basically told him, I'm like, look, if you can get me a job in Florida, then, we're good. But I won't go anywhere else, just Florida. And, I explained the situation about my grandparents. And unfortunately, by the time I got the job, I think it was my grandfather. He passed away just before I started. And so I just sort of started at that station. I was so close to my grandparents, and, they mean so much to me to this day. I just was really mourning and just in such grief. And I just wasn't really the same for a little bit,
Yeah, just not in the right headspace to be doing anything,
right,
let alone a new job.
Right. Yeah, I just wasn't really ready for that. And that particular station was very, very competitive. Whereas every single day they would have, us, like the employees, vote against each other to see who had the best stand-up the day before. And whoever had the best stand-up in their package would win a gift card. And it's, and then also, it was just a very, very competitive station internally.
Yeah.
So,
Hunger Games of newsrooms out here with that. Yeah, that's pretty savage there. We had something like that at the ABC in Pittsburgh for a while, where they called it the Newsies. I can't remember what they called it, but I think it was the Newsies. And there was like a trophy, and if you, it was just kind of voted on by the news director or the assistant news director. And if you just did the best thing of the day, whatever that was, if you helped someone or had a good stand up or made an extra phone call or whatever, got an exclusive, then you would win the Newsie for the day. And it was the exact same thing. Like at the end of the month or something, the best newsie person, the person with the most newsies or whatever would get like a gift card to a grocery store. There,
but who would vote? Who would vote for that award? Would it be management, or would your colleagues vote against each other?
That was just management. They just kind of.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
that makes sense to me.
Yeah, and when I first started, I liked the idea. By the end, I'd soured on it a little bit, but the issue with it was that management would make the ultimate decision, but they accepted like submissions and like nominations from the talent, like from employees. So I mean, oftentimes, that kind of led to it being like a little bit just up to like how motivated employees were to, and you couldn't nominate yourself, but like, I don't know, it was a good idea, but sometimes,
so basically like if you had a friend in the newsroom.
Exactly. Yeah. It can be a little distorted by, when it's put into practice. So.
Right. Absolutely.
All right. So you're there in Orlando, and it's not going incredibly great. So how long were you there for? Just 1 year?
So yeah, just 1 year. Basically, it was the contracts that they had were, you had a year, and if they didn't like you, they didn't have to renew you. That's sort of how the contracts were written there. And luckily, what was nice about this station, they gave me a really long heads up. I think it was maybe 3 months before my contract ended, and they said, look, we're not going to be renewing you. And they still, even though I knew that, let me stick around. And, so it wasn't something like it was no warning or anything. Like, they told me months in advance. So that was the one positive thing in the way they handled it. I felt,
Sure.
They handled it in a very, very professional way.
Sure. Yeah, that's good at least. So what did you do after that?
So after that, I still had the same agent. And, I initially had told him that, I really wished to stay in Florida, but I was open to going other places. And at this point now, let's see. No, so it was my grandmother who passed away before I started Orlando. And then at this point now, my grandfather's sick. So I'm definitely, wanting to stay in Florida. And then he tells me that, he has an opportunity for me to go to Tucson. And I say, absolutely not. And I actually turned down this job because, my grandfather's now very gravely ill, and I certainly want to stay by his side. But then my grandfather passes away. And I actually went back to the news director and said, look, if I can, have a few weeks to, get through the funeral and whatnot, I actually will take this job if you still would like to offer it to me. Because, I obviously didn't have to save my grandfather anymore. And so they still wanted me. And so that's when I went to Tucson.
Okay. What year would that have been approximately?
Wow. I'd honestly have to look. But I was there for, I think, 2.5 years.
Okay. So probably somewhere in the range of like 2013 or 14 or 2012, something like that.
Yeah. And I think it was actually 2016, I think, when I was let go.
Okay. So this was the NBC station in Tucson, Arizona, and you were hired as what, general assignment or investigative or?
Investigative. Yeah.
Okay.
And it was actually, believe it or not, a one-man band position again.
Oh, wow. Was that difficult for you to go back to that?
Well, first of all, I did take a bit of a paycheck cut going from Orlando to Tucson. I knew I was going to have to do that because it is a smaller market. And then on top of that, having to do the MMJ thing, it wasn't tough for me. I think what was tough for me was the fact that there was another investigative reporter at the station, and he had his, own crew. He did have a camera guy. He had someone who was helping him, produce and edit. And meanwhile, then there's me who, has to do everything herself. And we were both expected to turn out the same amount of content, and we were being compared to each other. And that's what bothered me.
Right. So you were there for a few years.
No. Yeah. 2.5 years.
Okay. I know you were still going to some of the IRE, investigative reporters and editors conferences and whatnot. But it sounds like you weren't entirely happy there in Tucson. And so I do remember there being some sort of drama, sort of surrounding your departure from Tucson. And I do remember it had something to do with like a Periscope video or something like that, and a dog or so. So if you're comfortable,
a Periscope video and a dog.
Are you comfortable talking about that situation?
Sure, absolutely. Let me just take a sip of my tea real quick.
I thought you were going to say vodka for a minute.
No, I don't drink.
Admirable.
But that would make sense. I know a lot of reporters do.
Yeah, no, it's definitely better to not drink, I think. But yeah, a lot of reporters do so probably heavily.
Yes. That's like a little secret that viewers don't know.
Right.
A lot of reporters are drunk from my experience. I mean, not on the air, but I don't know, maybe some are, but that was my experience socially. I met a lot of drunk reporters. But anyway, so going back to the periscoping dogs and leading to my dismissal from news. So this was when, for those who don't know what Periscope is, it's Twitter's version of live streaming. So if you've heard of Facebook Live, this is Twitter Live, basically. But it's called Periscope. And hold on one sec, I just need to plug in my phone.
Sure.
Real quick. I think, all right. So when Periscope first came out, my station obviously had no idea what it is. The idea of live streaming was this brand new thing that most people didn't know about. I actually found out about it from one of the public information officers from the fire department because they were going to start using it and told me and a couple other people about it. And so that's how I, first found out. And I, experimented with it and went to my news director and also one of the promotions guys and told them about it and said, this, live streaming platform is very cool. And here are some ways that we could potentially incorporate it into promoting our newscasts. And, my news director sort of went, okay. And then the promotions guy loved the idea. My news director did not like the idea that I went to the promotions guy sort of over her head. But, we were friends and it wasn't an intentional thing to go over her head. I just, said it in passing conversation as a, friend. But she felt like I was going over her, I guess, and didn't like that. And then for some reason, she said to me, look, I don't want you going on Periscope until we can come up with some sort of social media policy as a station, because they didn't have a social media policy at the time as to, what we can use, can't use, what the rules are, etc., except for the common sense stuff that is, sort of in our contract, that the unknown, the stuff that we just know common sense wise that, hey, don't say this on social media, don't talk about your political affiliation, don't talk about stories, don't badmouth the station, common sense, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And, I mean but there were no rules as to, in black and white as to what you're supposed to do. But then I noticed that other people at the station were using Periscope. And for those of you who are familiar with Periscope, this was when the platform was so new, it hadn't even been launched on Android yet. So it was only about a month old at the time. And so keep in mind, my station thinks it's just this really weird thing. But I'm noticing that one of the meteorologists is using it already, and he's, used it at the station, and other employees are, actively using it. So why am I the only one who's been told not to use it? Mm-hmm. So that sort of rubs me the wrong way. And one night, my dogs, I had 2 at the time, were snoring, and it was the cutest thing in the world. And I say, well, what's the harm if I live stream some video of my dogs? I'm not working, and it's not me talking. It's not video of me. I'm not on the clock. I'm going to live stream video of my dog snoring. Mm-hmm. So I did it. And as I'm live streaming, little notifications pop up of who's joining the live stream. And as I'm live streaming, I see that our social media director joins the live stream. I don't say anything, but I see him join. Mm-hmm. And he also wasn't happy that I noticed, this new social media platform and brought it to management. He's the one who's supposed to notice this stuff and, be on the ball as far as like social media stuff.
Right.
So I think he was sort of mad about that too. I mean, who knows? Anyway, so he tattletales on me, quote unquote, and, tells the news director that I went on Periscope, even though I wasn't supposed to. And I end up being called into the general manager's office. And he says, Marisa, and my news director's there as well. And he says, Marisa, we told you not to go on Periscope. You did anyway. That's insubordination. So we're going to have to let you go.
Wow.
And, other than, I was given no other warning. I had never been in trouble at the station, never been written up before. And just at that moment, no more pay, no more health insurance, nothing. And that was it.
Jeez, what a situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy how, I'll tell you, I've experienced things like that before without naming any names or any stations where people are like kind of territorial about ideas and, feeling like undercut. And it's kind of a shame, sometimes. And again, I wasn't in your newsroom. I don't know the full situation, but like, it sounds like there was definitely some like jealousy or, people who, they wanted to have that new idea and present it. And it sounds like what you were doing was more so like to try to help the station as a whole, be on the forefront of a new technology, a new tool. And it's just kind of crazy that led to your dismissal.
Well, I think there were some other reasons why they were just trying to find some way for me to, or some way for them to say that I screwed something up. Like, I think that, and that was maybe the first time that I had finally not followed an order, I guess, even though as ridiculous as it sounds, because there were a couple other people at that station that didn't like me. And so, and also some high-powered city officials that didn't like me, because of stories I was in the process of working on. And there's just a couple really shady things, let's just say, that, I won't get into, maybe, I don't know, but it really just, it was in horrible taste. And to this day, I'm a very forgiving person. And I always believed in not burning bridges. And, however, I really feel like that station was in the wrong. And, I just don't know, like, how the management at that station was able to sleep at night, like knowing like what they did. They just did it in such a horrible way.
Geez. So, I mean, that must've been, how did you feel at that moment, the next couple days?
Oh God, I went into a horrible depression, over the next month where, I wouldn't even leave my apartment. I mean, I just was heartbroken, absolutely heartbroken. I loved my job. I was that reporter who would stay at that station, for hours and hours after my shift, not putting this down on my timesheet, just working my ass off. And, I was always there, when the morning shift came in, and I would volunteer to go shoot breaking news, even when, I was on vacation. Like if I was that kind of reporter. I volunteered to do every single public appearance event that we did. Up until the day I was fired, when I went to any IRE conference, it was something I paid for. It wasn't, something the station sent me on. I paid for those experiences. And so I just, I was always married to my job. Like I didn't really have a social life outside of work at that point because I was so obsessed with work, which is, not a good thing. It's not good to be that obsessed with your job.
Mm-hmm.
And to the point where if you lose it, you don't have anything else,
Yeah.
And so when I lost it, I felt like, I lost my heart, and, so I had nothing in my mind. And so I was just so depressed and I felt so betrayed, because I had, I thought like my news director, every single day, like I'd bring her Starbucks, like we had almost sort of like a friendship too.
Mm.
And every day, like I'd bring her Starbucks, her unsweetened green tea, and she would put this like certain type of sugar that sometimes I'd bring her that sugar. I forgot what it was.
Was it like the stevia?
Stevia in the raw.
Yeah.
Stevia in the raw. I remember once I brought her a box of that. So we, had like, and sometimes, she'd keep me in her office for an hour telling me about her personal problems. You know what I mean? Like, so I felt like, I just felt so betrayed. I really did, because another employee had been fired, I think a month before me, and he had been given a written warning, and that and after that written warning, I guess he, screwed up again, and that's when he was fired. But me, I had never been in HR before. I was that model employee that just hadn't screwed up. And then all of a sudden, it, because of snoring dogs, I was let go, and it also financially ruined me. I had a BMW lease. I had just re-signed a lease at my apartment building. And so you have these financial obligations that all of a sudden you lose your paycheck, and, how do you pay that stuff?
Yeah. I mean, that's scary, actually. That's, it's and then you're, kind of naturally depressed and sad. And so you're really not in a great mood or headspace to be now shopping yourself to other TV stations, because you're, kind of emotionally distraught. And it sounds like an incredibly difficult situation. So we'll press fast forward. So you're kind of sitting there on your couch now, feeling betrayed, definitely quite depressed, a little confused. And, how are you able to, in brief, how are you able to emerge from that, and what came next career-wise?
So that time I just slept. I didn't even have the energy to watch TV. And so finally I called up my mom and I said, Mom, I really need help. Like, I'm just not right. And she comes to town, and we end up calling. I actually was seeing a psychiatrist at the time. And she basically said, look, she needs to go into treatment for depression.
Mm.
And I was diagnosed with major depression and PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, which was like immediately affiliated with, the trauma of, just being let go, I guess. And so that, I would say, saved my life, going to treatment I went for 5 weeks. And I went to one of those really nice upscale places in the Arizona area. It was, what was it called? I don't know. But my parents were kind enough to pay for that. It was really expensive, and something that insurance didn't pay for. So, so I did that. And then one of the therapists there, I didn't want to get back into TV news at the time because it would have been like too traumatic. I would have, just felt like, oh, they're going to let me go, or they're going to, and I, every Friday, I think they would have a talent show there, and I always did the talent shows. One day I'd play the guitar and sing a song I wrote, or I would do one of my characters. I have all these different characters that I do, and, all these different voices. I know that sounds really silly, but, being a former musical theater person, I'm quite eccentric and have all these, all these things I do. So, and people loved it. I was just like the comedian of this place. And if there were a sad person, that never smiled, I would be the one person that would be able to make this person laugh at this place. And, it just brought me joy to make people smile.
That's really interesting that like you went in there because you were depressed, and then, you kind of like, it helped you to make other people happy. That's interesting. Like, sounds like it helped you to get out of your own depression.
Oh yeah. I was like the class clown of that place, like I remember there was, we had separate boy and girl sides. During the day we would, intermingle and go to like classes with each other, but then obviously there were different sleeping quarters. And I remember there was this one night where I dressed up like a boy and snuck over like to the other side, like to where their smoking area is. And I just kept fooling everyone. I'm like, hey, how's it going? And I mean, I got away with it, and just everyone just thought it was so funny. And it was just so, that type of, troublemaking doesn't, hurt anybody. But, I was like, I loved like little pranks like that. And it would just make people laugh.
Right. Absolutely. So you were there, and, what was the next iteration? Eventually you decided to get back into the working world, and what did you, how did you, I know now you're doing acting. So how did that come about?
Right. So one of the therapists there said, Marisa, I really think that you should get into improv. And, obviously we don't want you to go back to Tucson because that's going to be too traumatic. And she's like, you should go out to LA and pursue like acting. And I said, wow, like I've always wanted, she read my mind because it's something I always wanted to do when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. But, my parents divorced. My dad actually moved out to LA, and, my mom was in Miami where I was raised, and my dad would always try to get me to move out to LA with him to, and said, oh, Marissa, there's this acting job you could do. And, my dad always knew from the time I was a kid, I always wanted to act. But, so I did that. I just, even though I still had to pay rent on my Tucson apartment, I continued to do that, but I took, whatever savings I had and used that as my, down payment or whatever that is for a lease in LA, and just said, excuse my language, but I said, fuck it. And I'm not going to worry about the money aspect. And I'm going to just do this and try it.
Yeah.
And that's how I ended up here.
Yeah. So that took some bravery and kind of a leap of faith, I would imagine. So you moved to LA, you get an apartment. And did you like hire an agent or just like post ads on Craigslist or look up like open auditions, or how did that work?
Yeah. So I haven't gotten an agent yet, actually, but I found out, the various ways to start looking for acting jobs. There are definitely, don't do Craigslist. There are a lot of scams out here. So you do have to be very, very careful. And even on the legitimate acting sites, there's still scams. Mm-hmm. So, people need to realize is you should never have to pay for any acting job or any agent or manager. They should be paying you. Okay. So, but I, just got myself registered on the different casting sites. I went to this place called Central Casting, which is like a place where every single actor who moves out to LA just sort of registers at, and, for background roles. And I just started getting work.
Wow. How long did it take you to get your first gig, your first job?
Wow.
Like a week, a month, a year?
You know what? I will say like just after a few months, I actually got a job that made me eligible to join the union, which is a huge deal. Wow. Because there's some actors who have spent 20 years out here and still aren't eligible to join SAG-AFTRA because you have to get a certain number of, union jobs as a background actor, or you have to get one lead job and you get something called a Taft-Hartley. Well, I got a lead job and I got a Taft-Hartley like just a few months after moving here. And that was because of just one of my auditions.
Wow.
And yeah. And unfortunately though, because the union dues to join, it's so expensive. I think it's $3,200 to join, the one-time fee. I couldn't afford that by the time I was eligible. So it took me, I think, 2 years to finally join. And that was because one of my Periscope fans all the way in Canada said that he just believed in me and wanted me to join because he felt like, I had talent, and he actually paid the entire due amount. Yeah.
Wow. And when you say Periscope fans, I mean, can you explain what you mean by that? Because I know you were doing it at the kind of like the inception of Periscope, and then kind of led to the dismissal in Tucson. I assume then that you kept doing it, and were these fans from like your local TV days, or were these new fans, or these acting, fans of you as an actress, or both? Like, what do you mean?
Yeah, no, I just have viewers from all over the world who, once you start, broadcasting on Periscope for a certain amount of time, every time you broadcast, more and more people discover you. And if they like you, they'll keep watching you. And I just have certain viewers that have been watching me for years now. And they're just, I guess, fans. And they sometimes know more about my life than I do. And, there's certain viewers who are in every single one of my broadcasts. And I almost consider them family. They're like a support system. It's amazing. And they're literally from all over the world. And sometimes I get thousands of viewers in these broadcasts.
Well, I mean, what do you typically talk about during your Periscope broadcast lately?
I am 100% open with them. I talk about my life, anything that's going on. When my dog passed away recently, one of my dogs, it was them that comforted me. I spoke and cried to them about it because they loved my dog Boo Boo. Not as much as me, but some of them, because I show my dogs in my broadcasts, and so many of them were, just as heartbroken. And sometimes I'll go on and do one of my characters, and I have certain characters that, they're particularly fans of. I have one that's a fortune-telling character. She talks in like a Middle Eastern accent, sort of like this, and she is a fortune teller, and she is called Madame Fulashit, and it's Fullah, Sheet, Sheet, and she tells you your fortune, your future. And, people are big fans of her. And, people will call me, and, people can call into my broadcasts and tell me about their lives and hard times they're going through sometimes. And so, it's just I don't really plan my broadcasts. It's just always different. Who knows?
Yeah. When do you typically do these broadcasts?
That's the thing. Like I really don't plan them. Just sometimes if I'm in a cool place, if it's something cool to show, I'll just start up the phone and broadcast and be like, hey, look at this, and or if I feel like I need to talk about something, I'll start up the phone. It's just totally random. And some of my broadcasts I keep up for replay viewers. Others I take down right away. And I do that because I want people to follow. me and know that, hey, if you want to see a broadcast, you got to be following my account.
Sure. Sure. Do you do like Patreon or any of that stuff, like the websites where people can kind of like contribute or like do a subscription to support you?
No, I don't.
Mm-hmm.
Periscope has something called Super Hearts, where people can contribute a Super Heart, like they pay for them through the App Store.
Mm-hmm.
And if they like your content, they can give you a Super Heart. So I'll sometimes get, a payout from Twitter because of, Super Heart contributions.
Oh, okay. So is Periscope still like, is it thriving, or is it on life support, or how is it doing? And the reason I ask is because I haven't, done much with it in the last really 3 to 4 years. It seems like Facebook Live has kind of, eaten up the market share to a large extent. I mean, before Periscope, there was even Meerkat was really the first one that I was aware of, which that was back in 2014, through an Israeli company. And then very quickly, came Periscope next, which was really dominant. And then Facebook Live sort of seemed to enter the marketplace and take over. But, what are your thoughts on that? Is Periscope still thriving?
Oh, yeah. Well, I would say that the majority of people know of Periscope through Twitter the only reason why is because basically Twitter has just recently started integrating the live video into the timelines.
Uh-huh.
And now through your Twitter timeline, you can actually hit, live video. Mm-hmm. And that's the same thing as Periscope. That's through my Periscope account. So I can either hit, go live through my Twitter feed, or I could hit it through Periscope. And either way, it's going to go to my Twitter timeline, and it's the same exact thing. So it's just most people know it as Twitter Live.
Sure.
And I think they're trying to build the brand more by identifying it as Twitter Live now.
Okay. It's fascinating. I mean, as of
20 owned by Twitter.
Right.
If I actually have my taxes for the Super Hearts through Twitter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, because as of 2013, nothing like this existed publicly. And then suddenly, as of 2014, 2015, and so on, it's just I remember messing around with Meerkat when I worked in Connecticut. And I would set up my phone and actually let people, view our live broadcast. But if they weren't in our area, I would they could watch me broadcasting, in the studio through my phone while I was doing a live newscast. And it was on Meerkat, and it felt really high tech and cutting edge. And, now that seems super old school. This is the whole new world here of live video. It's just so easy now to go live from anywhere. It's just interesting to me. But so I'm actually on Twitter now. How do you do the live function? I don't see that button whenever I go to make a tweet. Is that only on your phone, or?
So as if you were going to compose a post.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. I wonder if I can click off of this and do it. All right. I need to check this. So if you were going to click a post thingy, and if you were to click the photo thing, for the video, and then there's one button where it would say capture and another one that says live.
Oh, okay.
Do you see that?
I'm doing it on a laptop, so I don't think it gives me that option here, but maybe if I were
on a laptop, you can't do it either on a mobile device or iPad. I don't think you can do that on a laptop. I could be wrong.
Okay.
But, or you just may have to update the app, but I'm pretty sure that's not available yet on laptops. I don't have a laptop. I would love to have a laptop. My laptop is still from college, and it's very broken.
Okay.
So yeah, that's something I'm saving up for eventually.
So what role are you, most excited about or most proud of since you've been an actress? What is your biggest role? I think you probably get that question all the time, but it might even be a rude question to ask an actor.
Not at all. No, not at all. Honestly, I don't know if there's one that I'm most proud of. I would just say as long as I'm getting work, even if it's, being in the background of something, I'm happy. like, and that's what's been amazing. Anytime I work on a show, they call me back and want me again. And that's the biggest compliment I think that an actor can get. So the fact that, lately I've actually just been getting jobs every week, and those shows, I'm actually getting multiple calls for, a certain day, and I have to say no to jobs.
Wow.
I mean, that's amazing. And I have some projects that are coming out that, you'll actually be able to see me in. Some of them, it's not in actual lines. I do have a film coming out that you will be able to see, and I'm going to the premiere in January. And there is you can watch the trailer on YouTube. It's called Interreflections. And believe it or not, I play a news anchor. And so for anybody who is, a reporter or news anchor, obviously in Hollywood, there are so many roles for news reporters and news anchors. And I've gotten so many of those roles. So, so that film will be coming out at the beginning of next year. And then I just have I just worked with, incredible, huge actors recently that, I can't even tell you about because the projects, haven't been released yet. We technically have non-disclosure agreements, which, we are supposed to not disclose what projects we're working on until they air. But I can just tell you that I have been in scenes with, Oscar award-winning actors and just incredible people, and in these projects that are just going to be very, very cool, and just worked on some TV shows for some of the networks, and it's just been really fun.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. Good for you. Making your way out there in LA after a pretty rough departure from local TV, but it sounds like you've absolutely made the best of it, and sometimes that's the way life works. I've found as I get older that there's always that quote about crisis can truly be an opportunity, and at the time it doesn't seem like it, but so that's awesome. So you're able to pay the bills full as an actress full time, or do you have other work as well, or do you just do the acting full time?
No. So I actually every actor needs some sort of side hustle. It's sort of like how people would joke in the past that, every actor is a waiter or waitress, These days, every actor is going to be an Uber driver, or, the Uber drivers are like the new waiters and waitresses of the past. And so my side hustle is eBay. I love selling stuff on eBay. So I have a full-time eBay store, and that is Thrifty Chick LA. If anyone wants to check it out. And I'm really into it. I list new stuff every day in all sorts of different categories. And I love when I sell something, I package it all pretty. And I have a 100% seller positive feedback. And I've been selling since my very first job in TV news, I think. And so, yeah.
Awesome. I thought I was the only local TV reporter who had a side eBay gig, but I'm learning tonight that I'm not. I'm also kind of into eBay. It's funny when you say eBay, sometimes I feel like I get a weird look from people, kind of like, I don't know. It's almost like there's a stigma to it, but and I'm not sure why, but or maybe I just have a complex about it. But yeah, no, I've been doing eBay for a long time myself too. I don't have a full-fledged store with a title and all that, but just here and there, just selling stuff since I was about 16 or 17 years old. So it's fun. You kind of get a rush from it, and it's kind of cool to mail stuff out to people that's going to make them happy, and and make a little side cash. And I like side hustles. It's sometimes I probably extend myself a little too far with these different things, but definitely enjoyable and a good way to make side money. So That's cool. That's cool. Interesting. I'll have to check out the store.
Yeah. See, the thing with acting, Thrifty Chick LA.
Yeah.
But the thing with acting is you could do one commercial and be set for life. Like some of these commercials will pay like $30,000 for just, one little like quick shoot, 2 lines or like, 2 words even. Right. And $60,000, and you also get residuals. However, most of my roles right now are, background roles, and I don't have an agent yet either. So if I got an agent, then I'd probably get, some legitimate auditions, and, you can't really find out about those. Once you join the union, it's harder to get these auditions. But when I was non-union, gosh, I was getting auditions left and right. But once you join the union, it's definitely much harder. So my next stop is I have to find a agent. So that's what I'm working on right now, or I'm going to work on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm on your International Movie Database page, IMDb, and it says that you're the daughter of former KCAL 9 consumer reporter Alan Mendelson. Is that accurate?
Yes. I think so. I had to do a genetic test, but, and he claims that, I'm really the daughter of the milkman, but no, I'm kidding. But he really, he has he's a sick humor. So, but, yes, he's my father.
Does that inspire you? Is that what kind of partially inspired you to get into local news in the first place?
I don't know if it inspired me per se. I kind of grew up in newsrooms, and, he always would have me watch him on the news. So it kind of, I think, came naturally. He says I was actually on the news the day I was born. I was in a promo because a friend of his was at the hospital that I was born in and needed to borrow a baby for a promo. And I still keep in touch with that reporter, actually. And, I met him later in life. And, it was just like I gave him the biggest hug and he gave me the biggest hug. And we just think it's so cool that he held me the day I was born,
Yeah, that is.
And, my dad used to bring me and my brother on the air and bring us to the stations. And at an IRE conference, I actually met one of his colleagues, and his colleague said, Marissa, you used to sit next to me and bang on the typewriter. And this was, when they had typewriters at the stations instead of computers. And so, it was just like a natural environment to me. However, I think was born with that journalism bug because I, at a very young age, made something called the house newspaper, where I would distribute a weekly newspaper to my household and write little articles about each person in it. Yeah. And then when we got a video camera, I started making little documentaries.
Wow.
And which always ended with a flushing of the toilet. I always included that in my videos, which is, it's just my trademark. But, and I was on the news after Hurricane Andrew in Miami. I made a before and after report or video of my neighborhood. And so I was on the news, showing that video at age 10. And it was just a natural thing.
Wow. Awesome. Well, this has been a cool conversation to have with you. So you're going to, I guess, try to get an agent and continue to ascend in the acting world. And what would you put the percentage on that you ever get back into local TV news? Is it 0%, 1%, 50%?
That news bug, if you're a true journalist, it never goes away. And it has never gone away from me. If I see breaking news, I still pull over. I still have that urge to call the assignment desk. I still want to know what's going on. Mm-hmm. But I've tried to investigate whatever I can on the computer to, break whatever I can. Mm-hmm. And I've sent that information to colleagues at the networks and actually helped break angles of stories. So and they've been very grateful. And so I just still have that bug.
Yeah. So, so you're telling me there's a chance it could happen. Never say never.
You're telling me there's a chance.
Exactly.
It would have to be for the right station, the right management. And what that is, I don't know. I guess it would just have to be a feeling. A lot of news is going to the internet now. So yeah, I don't know. If an offer came, let's just say I wouldn't say no right away. I would definitely want to know more.
Sure. Okay, cool. Well, yeah, this has been a really cool conversation and certainly a little bit different from some of the other ones. I guess the last thing I'll ask you is, what advice would you give to, young reporters or people in local news who do go through a big change, whether it's having a sick parent or getting fired or, getting yelled at by a boss. I mean, maybe they're 24 years old and not sure what to do. What would you say, what would be your pep talk to someone like that?
Well, I would say that a lot of people, especially in the news business, it's such a competitive business. And I would say being in the news business is more competitive than any other business I've ever heard of. Every single day you're fighting with your colleagues to be that top story. It can really break your heart and make you feel bad. And if anybody's struggling with depression or sadness, just know that it's those tough times that make you stronger, and you will come out of it. It may feel like you will never be happy again, that will never, that you're always going to be sad and it's like the worst thing in the world. But eventually, you will feel better and you're going to be that much stronger because of whatever hardship you went through. So just hold on.
Yeah, great advice. If people want to find you on Periscope or other social media, how can they do that? What are your handles? What's the best place to find you?
All right. All my social media is at Marisa Mendelson, and that's Marisa with one R, one S. Mendelson, Mendelson. I'm on Twitter, Periscope, Instagram, YouTube, and I think those are my main ones. But all my DMs are open as well. And I think it's really important to, be active on social media. And I have absolutely no regrets. And I'm glad I did that Periscope of my dogs.
We got to get you on TikTok now. The new all the kids are doing.
You know what? I register for accounts everywhere. I have a registered TikTok account, but I don't use it. You have to also limit how many social media accounts you actually are active on, because it can drive you crazy. I have a hard time keeping up with DMs and accounts, just because, the more active you are, the more people are going to want to reach out.
Right.
And so you kind of have to start picking and choosing who you can respond to.
Yeah.
Because if you started responding to everybody, you would not actually have a life.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. You also don't want to dilute the brand as well and just have, 50 things that you're on. Although I will say, I think that I learned about TikTok last year from a high school student that I was working with on a video project for the school that I was consulting with. And I had never heard of it, didn't really know about it. And I created a page and started messing around, and it's very fun, I will say. And I think you would kill it on TikTok. It seems to blend kind of a lot of the things that it sounds like you're good at in terms of, the voices and characters and humor and all that. It seems like it's tailor-made for that. But obviously you're doing very well on your other social media and a Periscope star. So excited to watch where your career continues to take you, or where you continue to take it. And thanks again for joining the Reporter Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Really, it was an honor. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Reporter Podcast with Beau Berman. Please share, subscribe, and leave a review on Apple Podcasts.